There's a lot of times when, I'll go through I feel like I'm in a rut, and it's usually something military related, whether I missed the military or something I've just been thinking about that happened in the military. It just kind of like weighs down on you, and you don't really know who to talk to about it because people don't understand. And then some of my friends in college, they're a great group of people, but the things that set them off and put them in a depression is something that I would look at and be like, really, that's what you're upset about? But I don't say that to them, obviously, because I know why there's a difference, but it just kind of is one of those things where it's like you feel like you can't talk to those kind of people about your problems because someone's depressed because their girlfriend broke up with them, which is obviously something to be depressed about. But at least in my time in the military, the military ended so many relationships for me when I was in. So it's kind of like when it happens, it's like, oh man, that sucks. So it's just one of those kind of differences. Definitely a lot of reluctance to making friends in college comes back to the population is different, like when I was talking about like our sense of humor in the military, a lot of kids in college don't like that kind of humor, and I've definitely scared some people away from being friends with me. Hanging out at school, like in the cafeteria, I'd be sitting with a group of people that like I was friends with one of the people, and they're like, oh, come sit with us. I don't really see those people anymore because some of the things I said scared them away. But the friend that I knew, they knew I was like that, so they were like, oh well, they didn't care, but their friends cared. So that kind of like isolation definitely makes you not want to have friends, especially if you go on a couple combat tours. You definitely feel like the stuff that people complain about is like, really, like. I did one tour to Afghanistan when I was in, so like I said, I was long range artillery, so I wasn't, outside the wire, like on patrols and stuff. But, the pressure and the stress is still there. You're not safe, by any means. We got attacked a couple times, but we just happened to be on a big enough base where we were safe for the moment. But you never know what could happen.
So it's not as hard as, I guess, somebody who might have been active coming back. It still does have certain impacts. You have to, it's hard because when you're active duty, you're in that mindset all the time. Like you're ready, it's like a routine. But when you're in the Guard or reservist and you go away and then have to come back, it's kind of like your civilian life goes on pause for a couple days. So you might have responsibilities, like school or homework, but then you go away for the weekend and you might not have access to Wi-Fi. They try to accommodate you the best you can, but there's been a lot of occasions where I can't study or do my homework because of drill. And then you come back and you're like a little bit behind, even if it's just 2 or 3 days. Sometimes it can be 2 weeks. So that's a little tricky. You have to be more, I guess, versatile and flexible with your schoolwork. So yes and no, because I feel like, not to say that all students don't have different responsibilities. I just feel that it is a little different. I feel like you have to be more aware, definitely more mature, and be able to handle more in terms of school. And that, I'm trying to think back to what other people said right now. So I'm like, well, there's a maturity thing too. Yeah, having to juggle multiple things like work, school, Army, still have personal time for myself. It can be a lot sometimes. So I don't always tell people that I'm in the military. You do get a lot of silly questions. People assume certain things about you. They assume that a soldier is somebody who is strong all the time and who is like this crazy action-packed person who can do like serious combat skills, I guess, and that's just not true. I sit at a desk, for instance, and I literally push paperwork and process information. So people usually assume things, which is why I don't come out and like, hey, I'm a soldier, part-time, It usually comes up in conversation with students, and I'm very understanding and patient. I'll explain what I do and how long I've been in and what it's all about. With teachers, I try usually on the first day when they go through the syllabus and they read off the part about, veterans and military personnel, and just let them know, hey, sometimes I'm gonna have to be away, usually, Friday On the weekends, I might have to miss a few classes, Thursday, Friday. I just let them know ahead of time, and then I try to show them my drill schedule. That way it's not like a surprise for the teachers, and sometimes we can work around it if I have a test or a paper due. So they're pretty accommodating in that aspect. There's definitely stereotypes that surround the military, good and bad. You know, people really look up to you, I guess, in a certain aspect. When they do find out, it's like a different respect level. But then again, I don't want someone to treat me differently. It's also a pride thing for me, though, because I haven't deployed yet. So I feel that, not that I haven't served my purpose, but I haven't done what other soldiers have done. So it's kind of like I don't want them to be too thankful, I guess. It's awkward. It can be a little awkward because they all assume that, you know, you've been to Afghanistan or you've been places, and I'm like, well, not yet, maybe, but you know, my job is still important here.
Well, I would say like just small stuff. Like a lot of students complain about like 8 a.m. classes, and I mean it's kind of crappy. But honestly, you know, when I used to wake up at like 4:30 for basic training, you know, 8 a.m. is sleeping in. You know, so it's just small things. You know, students get upset about their professors not catering to their every whim, and it's like, well, come on, man, you had time to turn this in, for example, and you wait until the last minute. It's no one's fault but your own. I guess it's a maturity level, at least until maybe your peers are like in their senior year when they've, you know, developed mentally. But as a military member, you already spent your youth, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 years in the military, so you already have developed a lot. I guess this kind of goes back to like your first question about how being different. I think there's certain things that kind of bother me compared to how it would bother other people, like just like preparedness and being, you know, common courtesies, being polite, certain manners and all that. That kind of irks me at times, you know, when, like, for example, you see a group of people walking towards you when you're walking out the door, you know, hold the door for them. Other people just like almost like intentionally slam it shut, like just, I don't know, they're pretty inconsiderate. But it's just small stuff like that, you know. Attention to detail is one thing, like, I don't know, just the small intricacies that are taught to you during like basic training that people who've never been in the military, they don't notice. Yeah, I think it's half and half. If they have like relatives, they'll kind of know some of the experiences, especially if they're like an out-of-state student, because, you know, their family moved around. So they know some of the aspects of like the PCSing, the moving, or the odd training cycles where you might be gone for 2 weeks or a month if you're like going to a national training center. And then there's a lot of people who don't, but I think they try to understand. That's why they ask me like questions like, oh, how was basic training, or did you deploy or something. I don't think there's a complete lack of understanding. I think there's been a lot of efforts lately, at least with this generation of vets, to have some kind of connection with the civilian community and to have a mutual understanding.
Somewhat. Sometimes it comes up just because it's relevant, it's very recent. One thing that is difficult, though, is a lot of the students here are like 18, 19. So I would say that's the hardest part. So the ones that I talk to tend to be at least midway between my age and that age, the ones that just graduated. But I don't necessarily feel like they get it as far as like the military experience is concerned. I mean, if I tell them things, if they don't understand, they'll ask questions, and, you know, I'll fill them in. Oh, this is what I mean, you know. But for the most part, what we have in common is that we are in the same classes, and so we get that, if that makes sense. So that kind of brings us together.
The way that I see myself as a student compared to a lot of the other students in my cohort is that, for one, I'm a little bit younger actually than a lot of the students that are going for educational leadership. But what I've noticed is that I come in with a different sense of direction and drive. I'm very quick to get assignments done. I'm very, but with that, I'm very short and concise within my statements that I make. That sometimes throws it a little bit differently with my people that I'm in my class with, where they could articulate things and draw out like long paragraphs. Like the military has made me into a very short and concise individual where I could answer a question in 5 sentences versus 5 pages. Academically, the direction of which like I said before, the way that assignments are completed, they're done in time, they're done short. When it comes to in class, generally I'm a little quieter. In my last class that I was, the teacher called me the wall student, of where I always had my back to the wall. And I think it's more of a guarded position for myself, not knowing or having control of my surroundings. So I always felt like I didn't want to give up my back. That's one thing I noticed that was different amongst my other students recently.